Hello, I'm Alejandro Serrano from ActiveDharma.com, and today we're going to be discussing why the practice of the Buddhadharma needs to be heroic. So, at first, when I started practicing the Dharma, I just looked at it as, spiritual practice. But as time passed and I understood a lot more the teachings of the Buddha, I realized that in order to practice the Dharma, you had to have some courage. You had to be brave, because what the teachings will ask you to do is stuff that you're not used to doing at all, and that sometimes you resist because it's unpleasant. I'll get to that in a minute. I'll give you some more detail of what I mean. Before we get into the subject, I want to first talk about the definitions of the hero and why those definitions are so related to the Buddhist practice. So I'm just going to read you some of the definitions that I found. So to be a hero is to be a person who performs a very selfless action for the benefit of a noble cause. A hero is a mythological or legendary figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability. A hero is an illustrious warrior, a person admired for his achievements and noble qualities. And also, a hero is the one who shows great courage. So, as I read these definitions, I wrote down later some of the terms that are also found in the practice of the Dharma. They are definitely present in the life of the Buddha before he was enlightened and after he was enlightened, when he became a Buddha. Also, there are two stages, or I guess we could call them like role models in Buddhism, that embody much of these concepts, hero concepts. And these two roles are the Arhat and the Bodhisattva. And both these roles or stages clearly manifest actions that are selfless, that are noble in terms of the quality, that require courage, and that sometimes can be seen as part of warriorship. We need to discuss, what the hero is within the context of the Buddhadharma, because practicing the Dharma with this in mind will actually yield better results. And the reason I wanted to make this video is precisely because of what I'm saying right now. I think that a lot of people practice the Dharma just to maybe relax, get rid of stress, or maybe become a better person, a better human being. They practice the Dharma in a very conventional, superficial way. And that's not bad per se. I mean, I'm sure there are so many benefits related to this sort of style of practice. However, if you truly understand the teachings of the Buddha and you practice the trainings, you will realize that this courage needs to be present. The bravery to practice the Dharma will make you eventually a heroic person. You will strive for a heroic ideal. And I'll show you what I mean in just a few minutes. I call it a heroic practice because of three main reasons. Actually, 4 reasons. One of them I just told you. It's the practice of the Buddhadharma is heroic by nature. That's what it is. If you start practicing the Dharma, you will learn to be honest with yourself. You will learn to be someone with compassion. You will learn patience. You will learn to be super transparent with yourself. And that requires great courage. It's not something easy. It's not easy to be honest about your true nature, which is, at the beginning, it is very flawed. It is something that is not pleasant to look at. Why? Because the human condition is ruled by the egoic point of view, right? So there are many unwholesome habits present that the first time that you look at them, you're just disgusted by the kind of person that you actually are. And many people do not see that or avoid seeing their true nature because of that. It's like we are not really prepared to admit our mistakes. We always resist admitting that we are wrong, because we are taught that we should present ourselves as perfect, as people that don't make mistakes, because that's the people who do better or are more successful. So that's really ingrained in our mind, and that prevents us from actually accepting the nature of our condition, of the human condition, right? So if you practice the Dharma, you will have to look at what you really are, and that takes courage. So in a sense, practicing the Dharma is heroic by nature. So that's like the first reason. The second reason that I wrote down is because the practice is heroic because these days no one dares to do the right thing. No one dares to become extraordinary. Maybe a few. I'm not saying that everybody is avoiding this, but still, it's not something so common. And if we look at the standards of Buddhism, like the different types of achievements that you find, for example, becoming an Arhat or becoming a 10th level Bodhisattva, which is a super advanced spiritual being, you will see that a lot of people are not willing to become that because it's like super hard. It's not something easy at all. It is, in a few words, it's transcending the human condition. So very few people are striving for that because it is so challenging. And that takes me to the next reason. I think the practice of the Buddhadharma is heroic because it is super hard. And not only is it challenging for a practitioner, it also takes you to unpleasant experiences. And many people are not willing to go through that. And what I mean is, for example, when you start acknowledging your different unwholesome habits, your defects, and all the actions that have negative consequences in your life, those experiences can be very, very painful, and most people don't want to feel that. They don't want to feel the pain of acknowledging such defects, such unwholesome habits. It's like when alcoholics or addicts don't want to admit that they have a problem, right? Well, it's not just addicts or alcoholics that have this resistance. Like every single human being that I've met resists when they are forced to see themselves in the mirror and acknowledge that there are things that need adjustments, that some habits need to be abandoned, and you need to cultivate other virtues. Many people resist to this. So it is super hard, but you also feel very unpleasant experiences when you start meditating. So first of all, it is unpleasant to admit mistakes, and then it is unpleasant to meditate. And you might say, what are you talking about? If you meditate, you feel better, right? Well, if you practice meditation in a very superficial way, in a very common way, in a very mindfulness-based stress reduction way, you're going to feel very good. You're going to feel the relief of mindfulness, of meditation, and that feels very pleasant. However, if you practice meditation according to the teachings of the Buddha, well, the goal is very different. The goal is not to feel relaxed or to feel immediate emotional relief. The goal here is to awake, to understand the nature of the self, the nature of phenomena, and to see that the reality is much different. So, going through that process will take you to experiences that are not ordinary. If, for example, you let go of the self or the sense of self in any way, you might experience that your awareness expands, and that may feel very blissful at first, but also you might encounter different energy imbalances. And this is very, very common. And you will also feel maybe some pain, some energetic pain or headaches or blockages, energetic blockages throughout your body. And these aren't pleasant sensations. They're very painful. There's like so many people that are reporting unpleasant sensations. Like more and more we're hearing about people experiencing side effects of meditation that are not so nice. And maybe someone would say, this is not cool. Why would I practice the Dharma or Buddhist meditation if I'm going to feel like crap, having pain or feeling like energetic imbalances or feeling like maybe some vertigo or nausea, because that's also common. But from another perspective, one could say, well, this is expected. If your goal is to purify your experience, to purify your body, speech, or mind, then what are you expecting? That everything's going to feel like blissful? It's not. And the reason is because we have so many subtle negative habits in our cognition, in our sensory experience. And meditation reveals all those things that we have like messed up inside ourselves. These energy imbalances are caused mainly by sensory attachments, by trauma, emotional trauma, by maybe some unseen addictions to pleasure, or even just to addiction to the ego or the self, and changing, making that transition from an egoic perspective into a selfless perspective is unpleasant in itself. I mean, I'm not saying that it lasts forever. As you advance, the unpleasant experiences will be reduced and overcome, but it's not easy. So for that, you also need to be a little bit courageous, because it's not easy. You cannot really avoid this when you're practicing meditation as the Buddha taught this. Okay? So that's the other reason. And finally, I think the practice of the Buddhadharma is heroic because it also takes courage to die. And what do I mean by that? When you practice the Dharma, you're changing your cognition. You're letting go of many, many things. And it's not letting go just emotions. You just don't focus on that all the time. You also let go of other sensations. You let go of your own mind, your personality, your identity, your body, reality itself. Everything is let go. This is a very profound practice. And how do you think it feels to suddenly let go of everything that you are sensing right now? How do you think it feels to let go of who you think you are right now? Like, for example, I think of myself as Alejandro, and I like this kind of music, and I like to watch these kind of shows, and I'm the husband of this woman, and I love my pets, and etc. And the practice of the Dharma will make me let go of all these things that I just mentioned. To be willing to do that, it's like dying. It's like letting go of your life completely. So it's a spiritual death that doesn't require, unfortunately, a physical death. But that's what it is. And for that, it takes a lot of courage. You need to develop some sort of fearlessness to that experience. So you see, we have many reasons to see the practice of the Dharma as something brave and not something so like easygoing or soft or super pleasant, like we've been told in the past, because we've been listening for years that the practice of the Dharma, of the Buddhadharma, is something super peaceful, or at least that's what how they sold the Dharma to us. And I am guilty of that. In the last video, I also mentioned that I started promoting the Dharma as something that will give you so much benefit and peace. And yes, it does give you that, but you have to pay a huge price, which is the purification process, and that's not pleasant at all, right? So when we acknowledge that and we say, all right, let's do it anyway, that's when we are nurturing the courage to practice the Dharma. We need it. We need this courage, okay? But there are other reasons why I think the practice of the Buddhadharma is a heroic practice. And I'm saying this because when we look at the definitions of what it is to be a hero, some of the terms there that are mentioned in the definitions are present in the practice when you are a beginner, when you are an advanced practitioner, and when you are already an enlightened being. So, what terms am I talking about? They mention selfless action. If we look at the first definition, it mentions a hero is a person who performs a very selfless action for the benefit of a noble cause. Just having, as motivation to benefit all beings is a very Buddhist point of view. But before, having that motivation, when we talk about a selfless action, we're getting into Buddhist territory. Why? Well, if you know a little about the teachings of the Buddha, you know that one of the core teachings is that of anatta, or not self. The Buddha said that if you investigate experience, if you investigate perception, consciousness, the senses, the feelings, the sensations, if you investigate all your experience, you're not going to find something that can be called self. And this is, at first, the first time you listen to this, you're like, oh, that's very interesting. That's deep, right? But when you try the practice, when you start meditating and start, looking for evidence to see if what the Buddha is saying is right or not, you begin to see that he's talking about something very serious. And specifically, he is referring to a moment where the mind cannot establish the self. So he's saying that if we look experience, we'll see that phenomena is impermanent, it is always changing, that it arises dependently, meaning that this body, this person doesn't exist by itself, doesn't arise completely independent, but arises with other conditions. And that goes against our sense of self, because the sense of self usually is characterized as being independent. Like if you're an individual, you see yourself as an independent being. But this doesn't really correspond with the investigation, with what we see in this investigation of experience, of cognition and perception and all these things. And the Buddha says this, and when we verify this, it's just like mind-blowing. You see that the self cannot be established. That is the main point. And what are the implications of this? Well, to begin with, imagine what a selfless way of abiding looks like. It sounds like something positive because, people have told you in the past that if you act in a selfless way, then you're going to be of benefit, right? Because you're not just being selfish. You're not being like narcissistic or arrogant. You are being selfless and therefore you are of service to other people. But if you are experiencing a selfless way of abiding because of what you just verified, if your cognition shifted from a selfish way of abiding to a selfless way of abiding, your actions change. And the way you act is something that comes natural to you. Meaning, selfless actions happen automatically. And this is like mind-blowing. This is what draws the line between an ordinary person and an extraordinary person. And the Buddha speaks about this difference quite a bit in the suttas, in the discourses. There are people who are not instructed in the Dharma, and there are also people that have received teachings of the Dharma and have put them into practice and have mastered these teachings and have become noble persons. They have become extraordinary people. Not from the human condition. They changed of lineage. This is how it is referred. And this makes you a sacred person. If you look at the etymology of the word hero, you're going to find something that is relatable to this idea of becoming a sacred person. If I'm not mistaken, hero comes from heros, and heros means offspring from a god and a human, right? Someone that is the son of a god and therefore has, this divine descent. This is what is mentioned in the definitions. But what the Buddha is saying is, if you practice the Dharma, you're going to reach a sacredness within you that makes you completely different to other human beings. You transcend the human condition. And this is very, very important because it's something very similar to what, people in ancient times would say about the heroes, that would be of divine descent. So you don't have to be a son of a god or son of or the daughter of the gods to consider yourself heroic. What you have to do is become someone of noble qualities, which is also mentioned, I think, yes, it says, a hero is a person admired for his achievements and noble qualities. So these noble qualities are manifested naturally, effortlessly, when you shift from an egoic perspective to a selfless perspective, a natural, selfless perspective. You don't even have to force yourself to be selfless, and in fact, if you don't have the realization of not self, of anatta, of this non-establishment of the self, and if you try to act as a selfless person, everybody is going to notice. You're going to be seen as someone that is virtue signaling, and that's not what the Buddha is talking about. Of course, he's talking about a genuine selflessness, not a virtue signaling selflessness. Okay, and another term that is mentioned here in the definitions that I really like is, it says a hero is a mythological or legendary figure, often of divine descent, like we mentioned, endowed with great strength or ability. So, strength, great strength. This is like super interesting because I do picture, every time I hear the word hero, I picture someone very strong with like huge muscles. It's like someone like maybe He-Man or Hercules, or I don't know, Thor, or I don't know if Alexander the Great was a big, strong guy. He probably was, because he was one of the greatest warriors. But strength is related to the idea of the hero physically in so many ways. In all these definitions that we see in culture, all the learning that we've acquired, all the cultural baggage that we have inherited, point to heroes having a lot of strength, right? Being super strong. When you practice the Dharma, especially when you practice Mahayana Buddhism, which is focused on the path of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is a spiritual practitioner that trains in the Dharma for the benefit of all beings. That's like his main motivation. A Bodhisattva's motivation is to get enlightened as soon as possible for the benefit of all beings. Or if he doesn't get enlightened right away, he will still practice the Dharma for the benefit of all beings, even if it's a clumsy benefit. And just being someone of service suggests the idea of the hero. To be of benefit, you need to be someone with a strong character. So in this sense, we're not really referring to the physical strength, but we're talking about spiritual strength, something related to the heart, to the mind, to the soul, right? And when you practice Dharma, when you're training to become a bodhisattva or to develop your bodhisattva-ness, you train in certain qualities that are sacred in nature, but correspond perfectly with that those aspects of the hero. And one of those qualities is Virya. Virya is a Sanskrit term that means energy. It means passion, strength. It can also mean like enthusiasm. It's like something that perseveres. So Virya is a sort of strength that is very, very present in the work of a bodhisattva. And this clearly proves that it is similar to what we find in the heroes, because to be a hero, you have to be perseverant, disciplined, you have to be someone with energy, with this vigorous nature. So that's what you're supposed to be cultivating when you're a bodhisattva, when you're in the Buddhist path of the bodhisattva. In this way, we can see that Buddhist training is heroic in itself because of the qualities that you are nurturing. Another quality that I mentioned already is you have to be disciplined. So discipline is something super important in the Dharma. Whether you are practicing in Theravada tradition, which is focused on the Arhat ideal, which I mentioned earlier, or if you're practicing in the Mahayanic tradition, which focuses on the Bodhisattva ideal, you have to be super disciplined. And the term that Buddhists use in this training is Sila. Sila actually means ethical behavior, ethical training, ethical actions. It's like a morality, but it's also being very, very disciplined. And this is something you find in the hero as well. Someone who is supposed to save others, help others, and be of benefit of others must be someone that has developed integrity, discipline, and Virya, energy, right? So we have these qualities present in the trainings of the Buddhadharma. So that gives you more evidence still to consider the practice of the Buddhadharma something heroic, right? And finally, in one of the definitions, they say that a hero is an illustrious warrior. And the idea of the warrior is more than present in the Dharma. I want to mention that before Siddhartha became the Buddha, he was born in the Sakya clan, and in one of these clans that belonged to specific social class in ancient India, which is that of the Kshatriyas, which means the warrior social class. And he was born in that environment. So he was raised as someone that learned the martial arts. He learned archery, and he learned to fight, to wrestle. So he was already someone who was to become a great warrior, because that was like his destiny, being born in the Kshatriya social class. We can see that the warriorship is present in his life, but when he became the Buddha, the warriorship is also present, but in different terms. It is present in spiritual terms. If you become someone of service, that is, someone who teaches the Dharma for the benefit of all beings, that is something that corresponds perfectly with the heroic ideal. And you can see this in examples, not just from like noble knights in Europe, but also in the samurai, right? I think samurai means to be of service. I'm not really sure of the right translation, but I do know that samurais were warriors that were in service to the emperor and to Japan. So the Buddha was in service of mankind, and that makes him a warrior similar to the samurai, and also because he had inner battles. When he was getting enlightened, the main battles that he had was with a demon called Mara, and Mara represents ignorance, represents desire, like unwholesome desire, and aversion, fear. And the Buddha had to go through several trials to overcome Mara and be victorious over these demons, right? So that made him a warrior. But he was a peaceful warrior, a contemplative warrior. Sometimes I think that meditation is like a war that you submit yourself to, because you start fighting, not in an unwholesome way, but in a wholesome way, with your delusions, with your own ignorance. So there's a very warrior-like quality to the practice of meditation and the practice of the Dharma, because you will become someone of service, and before that, because you get rid of all these ailments that are within you, that make you a horrible person, and that you overcome to become a better person, right? So there's I could go on. I'm sure there are more terms within the heroic framework that are also present in the Buddhist ideal, the Bodhisattva ideal, the Arhat ideal. I'm just going to mention briefly the Arhat is like the highest level that you could get if you follow the teachings from the Theravada tradition, the Buddhist Theravada tradition, which is the tradition of the elders. An Arhat is someone who is free from the self, so he's naturally a selfless person, and that makes the Arhat a hero in itself. You could say also that the Arhat is completely free from ill will, so his behavior is beneficial, it is wholesome all the time, and there's a dignity to this wholesomeness that is present. Actually, I think the word Arhat means worthy one, so there's this dignity that is very similar to that of heroes. Okay, so that was like a brief mention of what an Arhat is. I hope that you like this video, and if you have any questions, comments, or disagreements with what I just said, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.